Brats is a 2024 documentary directed by Andrew McCarthy, and it was released June 13th, 2024 on Hulu, and it tells the story about the Brat Pack, the 1980s group of actors and actresses that were coined by the phrase in a New York Magazine article back in 1985, specifically more so for The Breakfast Club, Pretty in Pink, and the Joel Schumacher film St. Elmo's Fire. It's 30 plus years later. Andrew McCarthy directs this documentary, and he says at the beginning, let's see what it's like now and let's go talk to everyone. So he gets in contact with Emilio Estevez, Rob Lowe, Ali Sheedy, Demi Moore. Not only that, he reached out to Judd Nelson and Molly Ringwald, who did not appear for an on-screen interview and did not appear in the documentary, but other actors who were kind of a part of that movement or appeared in these films and knew and understood the culture back then of the youth movies for these teens back then. He also interviews Timothy Hutton, Leah Thompson, and the person who wrote the article, David Blum, which is really, really interesting. Now, back in 1985, if you didn't know, David Blum is a journalist for the New York Magazine, and he titled it Hollywood's Brat Pack, a play on words on the Rat Pack, which was made famous by Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Joey Bishop, and Peter Lawford. And basically, it was centered around the time and mostly focused on Emilio Estevez, who was out with Rob Lowe and Judd Nelson. But then this one line changed everything, the Hollywood Brat Pack. And it focuses on the aspect of how did their lives change from that article to now. Some loved the idea of calling it the Brat Pack, but some didn't. And it shows how Andrew McCarthy kind of didn't like that term at all. And when he speaks to the colleagues that he speaks with as Demi Moore, Emilio Estevez, and Rob Lowe, and Ali Sheedy, they go into the aspect of what it was like and how it changed their lives, and then they talk about behind the scenes as well. They also talk to casting directors. They talk to Howard Deutsch, who directed Pretty in Pink, and they have clips of John Hughes as well, talking about the movement of the youth culture back in the 80s with the teen movies. And John Cryer was also interviewed as well. This is a really, really good documentary. I didn't know it was being made. I first heard about it when I saw the official trailer that was released. And you could say, like, who is in the Brat Pack, who's not in the Brat Pack? Could certain actors be in it? Could certain actors not be in it? It was a whole interesting thing. It's like, as a child born in the 80s. I was born in 1987. So 2 years after the article came out, it's like, oh, you're kind of a 90s, early 2000s kid. Yes, I am. But still, I'm growing up in the time where these movies are only a few years old, and you know who these people are. I grew up with certain films of their careers. Andrew McCarthy with Weekend at Bernie's, Emilio Estevez with The Young Guns, and Demi Moore with Ghost, Ali Sheedy doing her thing, Rob Lowe doing his thing, Judd Nelson doing his thing. It's just an aspect of, wow, what is the thing? And the many themes were kind of universal in a way in this documentary. The aspect of how it was shot was great, has that nice 80s grainy film look feel to it, also with the music and the soundtrack, which is also mentioned how the soundtrack plays into kind of what the youth culture back then wanted. And you can't think of any aspect of, okay, St. Elmo's Fire. It's like, wait, but then you think about the song that was sung by John Parr. That's also a big thing back then. So basically it was a fun documentary. And seeing Andrew McCarthy interview David Blum, who wrote the New York Magazine piece, was really, really interesting. You think, okay, is he going to apologize for that? No, David Blum just likes it, and he actually kind of, in a way you could say, created the aspect of what the Brat Pack is. And then you have Andrew McCarthy trying to talk about where he's talking to certain authors or film critics or screenwriters, pop culture icons who know about the youth culture movement of the 80s, and kind of went into the 90s where they're like, if it wasn't for these films, you wouldn't kind of categorize yourself in certain areas because you watch these films, these John Hughes films. You want to be Ducky. You want to be Blaine. You want to be certain characters that these actors and actresses did play. And that's what comes across as, okay, the pop culture potency, which was bittersweet at the time. And it's like, huh, they're taking clips from news articles, Entertainment Tonight, and they're putting it in here, and it's done really, really well. It's just a nice thing, and it's an hour and a half long. So seeing Andrew McCarthy trying to deal with it 30 plus years later, and him talking to his friends, his actors and actresses, and people you didn't think he would be interviewing, it's like, okay, he also is trying to come away from that past. And Emilio Estevez said it perfectly in one of the scenes where he was like, you know, I've already seen a different path for myself, but in a way it's like, I don't want to look back on it where it's like, that's the past. Let's move forward. And John Cryer asked Andrew McCarthy, have you got in contact with Molly? And basically it's Molly Ringwald. And in a way, Molly Ringwald just wants to keep it in the past and doesn't want to bring up any, new things about it. Which is very understandable because, I mean, you would think like, oh, let's get all the entire Brat Pack together. It coined a phrase to a point where it put them on the map, and when you see or when you hear Brat Pack, you're like, oh, Andrew McCarthy, Emilio Estevez, so on and so forth. I mean, for now, what they're doing, the movies they've played in, the things that they're doing in their filmography, in their career. For things like this, documentaries like this, really, really need to be done more because it shows how it defined their early careers. But then when the article came out, it's like, oh, did it actually hurt their careers later on in the long run? Yes, I mean, they still had films, they still had movies. Some of them went on to be big Hollywood movie stars. Not saying that they all weren't, but they did become big stars. They had really hit movies, and to grow up in a culture of the 1980s up until the mid 90s, maybe 95 to 97, when the 80s kind of started to die down a little bit, and then the internet age came in. It's like, all right, how is the youth culture changing from the 80s when you had Risky Business, Dirty Dancing, Back to the Future, Footloose, Weird Science, Pretty in Pink? I mean, the list goes on and on about what is going on. And movies back then were geared to that 18 to 24 demographic because you bought a ticket 2 hours earlier and you had to go and wait in line for your movie because there was no advanced seatings. That was the fun of everything, and that was the fun of how when Leah Thompson explains it in this, she's like, you had that physical media. You could go and watch a tape, rewind it, watch it back. And it's also holding an album. You can see the cover of the album, put it on a record player, listen to it. It's the aspect of that age of how Hollywood discovered the box office potential of a young audience, and it did work. Back then, movies connected us to a time where we wanted that. And teen youth culture movies back then, from John Hughes films to whatever you want to call a youth teen culture film in the 80s, really captured that. Now, it doesn't happen like that, where it should happen. So really pinpointed where Andrew McCarthy now, as a writer, as a director, really hones in on the aspect of how things have changed in the history of Hollywood, which is very different than what it was some 40 years ago. It is really, really inspiring to see a documentary like this, and for adults my age who are now in their late 30s, early 30s, mid 30s, whatever you want to call it. We grew up and were born in the 80s. Films like this, we just watched like, well, what is this? What can it? And it had an impact on us. We quote, we run lines, we run dialogue, we inspire, and we're inspired by these films of that youth culture. And it really shows what, documentaries like this can hold for us. And Andrew McCarthy really captured the essence of, is it a good thing or was it a bad thing that they were called the Brat Pack? You have to ask yourself that question and to see if, wow, does it really change the perception of, did that article really change things for certain people? Or didn't it? Or did they not like it? Or did they like it? That's what the documentary is getting at. It was fun. It was great to see. I absolutely loved it. It's a nice movie that is about coming of age movies, the youth culture movement of the 80s. Also seeing everyone now still at their peak, doing their thing and what they love. And seeing Andrew McCarthy call everyone to get in contact with everyone was really, really good to see also. I loved it. I'm hoping more documentaries are done like this about films, actors, and, you know, the backstory of things, because that's the aspect and the essence of filmmaking that I enjoy also as a writer and a up and coming filmmaker, is the backstory and the behind the scenes, and, you know, the whole aspect of how everything is put together, and the stories you thought you know but you don't know until you hear it from the person themselves. Absolutely loved Brats. This was really, really well done. Highly recommend it if you are a fan of every single person in the Brat Pack and the movies of the youth culture teen movement of the 1980s, especially 1985. Let me know in the comment section below what you thought about Brats, the Hulu documentary series about the Brat Pack directed by Andrew McCarthy. Did you like it? Did you not like it? What did you think of it? What was your favorite part about it? What was your least favorite part about it? Did you like that they kind of got everyone together? Were you kind of sad and disappointed that Molly Ringwald and Judd Nelson weren't on there? And do you understand why they weren't? Do you think that that New York Magazine article coining the phrase the Brat Pack by David Blum changed their lives forever? Or do you agree with Andrew McCarthy, how it kind of changed everyone's trajectory of how their career would go? And who do you think is actually part of the Brat Pack of the 1980s? Let me know in the comment section below about all the questions I just asked. And be sure you click that subscribe button and hit that notification bell for new review videos on my channel. I will see you all in the next review video. I'm Mr. Filmstock. Thank you so much for tuning in.